All right. Well, welcome everybody. As I said, this is working with donations quickly and efficiently. So today we're going to be talking about the various ways to enter donations. And we're going to talk about both cash donations, which are referred to as gifts. And we're going to talk briefly about in-kind donations, which are goods and services. We're going to talk about, there's a whole bunch of different ways, there's kind of different places in the system where you can go to add gifts, and we're going to talk about all those various ways. And then we're going to talk about some of the special functions. We're going to talk about split gifts and soft credit, and how those relate to some of maybe the trickier donations that you may have, such as when there's more than two parties involved, like donor advised funds, or foundation gifts that are managed by a fiscal manager who's writing the check, but they're not really the entity that makes the decision, and they're not really the donor, etc. So we're going to talk about some of those examples as well. Now, we're not going to be talking about any of the configurations that are necessary for donation entry. This webinar assumes that you have already configured your system for donation entry. There's a separate webinar on that and a separate set of tutorials. So this webinar assumes that you've already set up your funds, your ask arrays, and if you're using programs and campaigns, is using those. This also assumes that you have done your acknowledgement settings at the very least, because default donation acknowledgement settings are required before you can enter a donation. So this assumes you have configured that tab and that you've configured at least one donation acknowledgement template. So all of that's covered under a different webinar, and you can find a recording of that in the support library, as well as written and video tutorials for each of those steps. So working with donations, now the one thing I want to add is that Fundly CRM sort of is predicated on cash accrual methodology and philosophy, which means that something can't be booked as an accounts receivable until you have it in hand. So today we're talking about donations, and we define donations as money you have in hand. So it's a cash or check or credit card payment that someone gave you for a donation right now. In the system, if you have a promise of a future payment, somebody says, oh, I'll write you a check next month, or every month or every quarter, I will give you $100 and I'm going to mail you a check. We call that a pledge. That is considered a pledge. And there's a separate webinar and separate tutorials on pledges as well. So we're just going to be covering gifts today. So just keep that in mind. Now, the one exception to the money in hand rule is recurring gifts or recurring donations. A recurring donation is a promise of future payment that is backed by a credit card. So if somebody has given you their credit card number and you've stored it and put it on file and you're automatically charging them every month, that is a recurring gift, and that would be entered as a recurring gift. And we're going to touch on that very briefly today. We do have a whole separate webinar that's on pledges, grants, and recurring gifts, so where we go much more into detail on working with those recurring donations. Now, when entering a donation into the system, there's a whole bunch of different places where you can go to enter the donation, and which path you follow will depend sort of on what else you're doing in the system at the time. So we're going to talk about all those various places where you can go today. And there's also two different interfaces. There's quick add and there's full add, and I'm going to go through both of those. The first place we're going to start, though, is from main menu, this gifts tab. This is your gifts index screen, and this is where you can go to find a list of all the donations that you've received for all time. So you're going to be able to see all those donations here. You can filter this by date and by contact or donation amount. And from here, you will be able to see some basic information about your donations. Recurring donations will show up here. They do also have their own tab. This is basically a filtered list of your gifts that are just recurring donations. And you'll be able to see if it's a gift or an in-kind gift. I don't seem to have any in-kind here. None handy, but in-kind gifts would show up. Oh, here's one, in-kind gift. You're going to be able to see the date. You're going to be able to see the donor name, the source or methodology for how that came into you, whether or not that donation acknowledgement letter has been sent, whether or not the donation was marked as anonymous, which we'll talk about what that means in a moment, And also, if it was linked to a campaign or a program, that will show up here. And you can also see the payment information by hovering over that. And then you can also right here see very quickly and easily if it's been paid or not, or if it's been paid in full. And when working with donations, you can edit these donations. So once you've entered one, you can always go back and edit it. You can also void or cancel a donation from this screen. In fact, this is the only place that you can void or cancel a donation. So it's important to note, you can delete donations by going to the invoices index area and deleting the invoice, but that will erase the donation like it never even happened. That's the nuclear option. So if a donation did happen, or you want the paper trail, maybe they made a promise and then they didn't follow through on that promise, and maybe you were counting on that money and had put it into like budget projections, so you don't want to nuke it because you want to keep that paper trail so that, you know, several months from now you're not like, why were we thinking we were going to have $100 extra cash flow this month that we don't actually have? So you may want to keep that paper trail even if somebody makes the promise of that donation and doesn't follow through. In that case, you want to use the void function. Void will allow you to keep that paper trail. And in fact, let's void one of these little puppies right now. So here's Sarah Nunn. She promised me $25 to my annual fund, and this actually was paid. She handed us $25 in cash. Now, maybe she decides, she's like, you know what, I didn't mean that to be a donation. You know, I said it was a donation, but I actually want to change that and make it an event registration fee and use it to sign up for an event or something. Or I want to use this $25 towards a membership that I hadn't used before, whatever. So we decide we want to void this donation. So we're just going to click void. It's going to bring up the void transaction screen here. You do have to give a reason. This is a required field. So and then, do you want to create a credit? So that means you kept the money. This $25 is in my bank account and I'm keeping it, and I'm going to put a credit on her account. Otherwise, if I don't want a credit, either I'm keeping it and she can't use it for something else, I'm not going to give her a credit, or I'm sending her back the payment, I'm going to write a check and issue a check to her, then I would say no. And then I'm just going to click void. I'm going to get a validation that this was voided successfully, and then I will see that this was voided here, and I can hover over it to see the reason. Now, because she did give me money, saying that I didn't want to create a credit did not get rid of the money she gave me. The system assumes that if I say I got money, I have money. So they're still going to show a $25 payment on her account for this. And if I wanted to delete that, I would need to go to her contact record, go to her ledger balance, find that $25 payment, and then delete it from there. Any questions about that, about editing or voiding? Okay. All right, so let's talk about adding these gifts now. So how do we add gifts? As I mentioned, there's a whole bunch of places that you can add a gift. There's also two sort of different screens. There's full add and quick add. I'm going to show you quick add first, and then we're going to talk about full add. Quick adding a donation is done from the quick add menu, and you can choose gift or in-kind gift. And we'll do a regular gift first, and then we'll talk about in-kind gifts at the end of the webinar. So we're going to add gift. The only place that you can quick add, by the way, is from that quick add menu. All the other add donation or add gift options are full add screen, and I'm going to show you what the difference is. We're going to start with a straight, very simple example first, and then we'll get more complicated. So we'll talk about the split gift option later in a few minutes. Just know that you can add split gifts from quick add. For quick add donation, contact name, fund, and source and gift date are required fields. You must fill these out. If the donor is not already in your system, you can add a contact on the fly simply by typing a name. Let's see who I've got. Do I already have, oh, I don't have Amy Adams, good. So I'm just typing a name, I'm gonna hit enter, and it will bring up my quick add contact. It'll ask me if I wanna add an individual or an organization. I'll pick which I want, and then if I say individual, the only thing that is required is first and last name. I can fill out any of these other fields that I might have, and then I could save and close. This will return me to my donation in progress, and I've now added Amy to my database. Otherwise, I could type a name that was already here, so I could pick somebody, and when they come up on my list, just select the name. Fund is a required field, so I can click in here, get a list of my active funds. This is only going to populate like the first 10, so if you have more than 10 funds, you will have to start like typing the name, and then you'll be able to get those other funds will come up. Source is how did this get to you? This is a configurable field, so did it come in the mail, online, in person, etc. Gift date is a required field. We're going to talk about this in a minute because there are actually several different fields here. There's gift date, there's transaction date, and there's payment date. And we're going to talk about those 3 fields and what they mean in a few minutes. Basically, the short version is you can define those fields the way you want to. What I always tell all of my clients, you'll hear me say this on many of my webinars, is pick a definition and then be consistent. That's the key to make your reporting clean and make sure everybody on staff understands what these definitions are so that you're all talking the same language. So gift date could mean the date it came in your office, like the date the receptionist date and time stamped it. It could be the date that the person made the commitment, like the date on the check, the date that they promised the donation. It could be the date that you're entering this donation. For some reason, if you want to post date it, and maybe you want the date that it's going to be deposited in the bank, then you could post date it. Whatever date you want, just pick a meaning and then stick with it. Program and campaign are optional. So if you want to tie this to a particular fundraising to a program, one of your programs and services, maybe the donor earmarked this donation and said they wanted it to go for your youth program, your youth arts program, or maybe you're going to earmark it, then you can do that. It is not a required field. Campaign, if this is related to one of your fundraising campaigns, again, you can earmark it in that way, not required. If this donation came in support of an event, such as it's an event sponsorship donation, or if this donation was collected at an event, maybe you passed the hat and or had a box where people could drop donations in the box at the event, then you can link this donation to an event as well, not a required field. Down here, you're going to pick the donation amount. This is your ask array. This populates from the fund. So you create the ask array, you link it to your fund, that populates here. Again, there's a separate webinar and separate tutorials on working with ask arrays and funds. So I'm just going to pick my $25 level. If this donation is a tribute gift, so it's being made in memory of, on behalf of, or in honor of someone, then you can indicate that here. If it's being made in memory of, on behalf of, or in honor of someone who is in your database, so that's generally going to be a living person, not always, but generally a living person, then you can select the name from names that are already in your database. If the person's not in your database and you want to add them to your database, then you can type the name, hit enter, and do the quick add individual or individual organization. If the tributee is not in your database and you don't want to add them to your database, perhaps because the person has passed away, and so therefore it would not make a lot of sense to then add them to your database, then you're going to type the name here in this field. Let's see. There we go. And you'll notice that the select name goes away once I start typing this. So now I can't select a name and put a separate name. I'm just saying this person's not in my database. I don't want them in my database. This becomes a static data field that's associated to this donation, but it's sort of not saved anywhere else in your database. Now, if you also want to send a tribute card, which means you're going to send a card to the tributee or perhaps a surviving spouse or their parents or another family member or friend of the tributee to let them know that somebody has made a donation, a tribute gift in honor of or in memory of this person they know or love or worked with or whatever the relationship is, then you can select send tribute card. You then now, you're going to be able to send that via email. You're going to select your template from your what's the word I'm looking for? Okay, just went right out of my head. Your configured tribute templates. There we go, a little tongue twister. And then you're going to select the recipient. And again, if the recipient's in your database, then you're going to select the name. If not, then you're going to type it here and their email address, and then you can add the personal message. So again, you can either select somebody in your database or add them to your database on the fly, or you can just add static information without creating a contact record for this tribute card recipient. Now we're going to say none for this particular one, so get rid of that. Then over here on the right, do we want to send our donation acknowledgement letter later, now, or never ever? Even if you skip the donation acknowledgement letter, it will be queued up in the donation acknowledgement area. It will be in the skipped column, and you can later change the template to a different template and still generate a letter. So skipping this does not cause anything catastrophic. We're not going to cover generating donation acknowledgement letters today. That is a separate webinar and a separate set of tutorials on working with donation acknowledgement letters. But just know that this is queuing this up so that you can go in there and then send those donation acknowledgement letters. Solicited by is who on your staff, or maybe your board, or maybe you have a volunteer fundraising committee, actually went and contacted this donor and asked them to donate. So that's the solicited by field. You can fill this out or leave it blank, it's not required. Soft credit donors are people who also are responsible for making this gift, but who are not the primary donor or not the person receiving the tax benefit. When the donor is an individual, soft credit donor is usually their spouse or partner. If the donation is coming from an organization, soft credit donor is often the person at the organization who authorized the donation. This is not a required field. You can leave it blank. You can add multiple soft credit donors by typing a name, clicking plus. So I could say, and we're going to click that. And then I could go in and I could add other soft credit donors here as well. If I add a soft credit donor and I don't want them, I can delete the trash can to get rid of them as well. Then finally down here, when you're doing quick add gift, you're going to enter the payment information as part of this step. So you're going to have to put in payment mode, the date of the payment, and the amount will pre-populate from the amount that was selected in the ask array. Reference number is not required, but you can enter it. Reference number usually is a credit card transaction number or a check number, or it could be like a wire transfer number, something like that. Or you can use this as a memo field and put a little note there. That is quick add donation. I can now save and close, and this would save this donation. It'll show up on my gifts index screen, and it will show up on the contacts record. I could save and add another quick add donation, or I could choose add more information. Choosing add more information will then take me to the full add donation screen. And I'm going to do that now to show you what the difference is. The difference between quick add and full add is that in full add, you get several additional fields that are not available to you in quick add. Those additional fields are, now you're going to notice it populated everything I filled out on my quick add, so I still have gift date and source and fund. We do have invoice date now. That's something you couldn't add when you're doing quick add. This is an anonymous donation. That is not an option when you are doing quick add. Anonymous donation means the person does not want to be acknowledged. They want no recognition for their gift. Selecting this as an anonymous donation will not trigger a donation acknowledgement letter. No donation acknowledgement letter will be queued up in the donation acknowledgement area. So this anonymous donation is not just that they don't want a letter, which if they don't want a letter, you would just pick skip for the generate acknowledgement. Instead, this is they don't want anybody to know it was them. So this will still show up on the contacts record. So if I went to Ben's record, it will still show that he made a donation. So I'll know that it came from Ben, but nowhere else in the system am I going to see that. I'm not going to get a donation acknowledgement letter. If you're pushing names of donors to your website through the integration, he wouldn't pop up in that list of donors or event sponsors, and he'll be hidden from the website as well. So that's what that function does. if my payment methodology was credit card, I would have an option here that says make this a recurring donation. And we'll talk about that. We'll do another example and I'll show you that. You can only make a recurring donation from Full Ad Gift. You cannot do that from Quick Add Gift. From Full Ad, you also get this gift memo field where you can add a note to this donation record. You still have program, campaign, event solicited by, soft credit. Full Ad, you can add a file. So you can upload a picture, maybe a picture of the check or the letter that came with it, docs, PDFs, and JPEGs. So you can add a file. And you also get this gift additional information area. This is a custom data set field. This is a place where you can create additional fields to record additional data about your donations that there may not be any other place to enter that information. This gift additional information custom data set is empty in your system until you create fields. These fields that you see here are ones that we created in our demo system. So your system doesn't have these fields. Your system has nothing but a blank space here. So types of things you could use this area for, kinds of fields you might want to make, to record corporate matching gifts and put in information if it's a corporate matching gift. Solicitation method. You may want, you have the source field and you could say, well, it came in the mail, but if you wanted to say this donation came in response to a particular appeal, it came in response to a particular newsletter or maybe a Facebook ad or a notice in a church bulletin or a professional association bulletin or an advertisement you did somewhere or a community event, then you may want to create a field called like solicitation method or something like that to know what this person is responding to, which can help with, you can write a report on that and then say, okay, what percentage of people responded to our Facebook ad, what percentage of people responded to our newsletter, etc. So that's something you could use here. You may also, when we get into some of those complicated third-party donations, donor-advised funds and fiscal managers and things like that, you may want to create a separate field down here for managing that, like, check came from, or fiscal agent or fiscal entity, to know, okay, this is the entity that wrote the check, but you're not necessarily they're not the donor and they're not the person getting the thank you letter, so you're not listing them as a soft credit donor maybe because they really are just like the accounting office that is cutting the check. But if you want to know that so that you can reference back, the name on the check and where the check came from, you may decide to enter that down here. And that can be, sometimes like PayPal, United Way, Network for Good. If you're using any of those entities and they're cutting you a check, but they're not the donor and they're also providing you the list of the names of donors, you may just want a field down here that says like fiscal agent or something like that. So those are just a few examples. Certainly you can use this area for anything you want. So that's the difference between Quick Add and Full Add. Any questions about kind of just entering a donation or difference between Quick Add and Full Add? Okay. Sophia asks, where do I go to configure gift additional information? That is a very good question, Sophia. You would go to Configurations, Custom Data Sets, and you will find in there a data set. It should be near the top of your screen that says Gift Additional Information. You'd click Edit on the drop down next to it, and then you'll be able to go in and create fields in there that will show up when you're full adding a donation. Now there's one other major difference between Full Add Donation and Quick Add Donation, which is that Full Add Donation, you add the payment information as a separate step. So I'm going to do another Full Add gift, but I'm going to do it from scratch this time, not from converting a Quick Add donation. Now, Full Add Donation you can get to from several different places. You can go to Gifts, the gift index screen, and down here in the bottom you can add gift and in-kind gift. And as I said, we'll get to in-kind gifts at the end of the webinar and talk about those. They're a little bit different animal. But you can add gift from here. I could go to a contact record. So I'm going to go to this Michael Alexis, who I wasn't in. Cecilia must be in. And if you're here on this screen, if you go to Giving Details, you can add gift. So you can do that right from there. You can also full add donation by going to the quick add menu and creating an invoice. And as you saw, you could quick add gift, and then you could click add more information to convert a quick add gift to the full add screen. You can also, if you're working in the index, the invoice index area, from the left-hand menu, create invoice. Or you could go to the contact and from here, create an invoice for that particular person. So there's like 6 different ways to full add a gift. There's one way to quick add a gift. So I'm just gonna go create invoice because any of those options I just showed you from the gift index screen, from the contact record, create invoice from quick add, create invoice from invoices index, add invoice from invoices index contact record, they're all gonna take you to this screen. So we're going to add another one. Let's do that Michael person. There we go, Alexis Michael. I don't know who this is, but sure. And here's that first date we were talking about. So here's invoice date. And then on the next screen, you're going to have the gift date, and then you also have the payment date. So as I said, you should decide, you should sit down with like your CFO and figure out what you need to track, because every organization is different. Some people like to know like the date time stamp when it arrived in your office. Some people use the date on the check. Some use the date you deposit in the bank. Some use the data entry date that you get around to actually entering the donation. So there's a whole bunch of different dates you can track. And in fact, you could use that gift additional information, that custom data set. You could have, if you want to track all 4 of those dates, date that the person mailed it or wrote the check, the date that it arrived in your office, the date you entered it, and the date you deposited it. You can record all of those. You've got 3 fields available to you: invoice date, gift date, payment date. You could create a gift in the gift additional information custom data set, a 4th field to track additional piece of information, which is, date received or, date mailed or, whatever you want. So you can track all those dates if you want by adding an additional field or 2 to your custom data set. So when you're creating an invoice, you're on the gift. So then these are my funds. So I can just pick my fund, and then I'm in the full add screen. So then I have to pick source, required field. Here's that gift date. I'm going to pick my amount for my ask array. And here's that. I'd like to make this donation on a recurring basis. So if we want to make a recurring donation, actually, we're not going to do that. We're going to do one example first, then we're going to do a recurring donation. So again, all these options, none of them required, gift additional information, acknowledgement, and then save. Then you're going to see that I can now add the payment information. So when you're doing full add, adding payment is a second separate step. Versus quick add, the payment information is right on that main screen. So right about now is when people start saying, well, Terry, what is the bestest possible way to do my data entry? Then which should I do? Should I do quick add? Should I do full add? Which screen should I go to? It depends. That's my answer for everything, by the way. It depends. It's always, if you say, what would Terry say? Terry says, it depends. It depends on, do you need those additional fields that are on full add? If you need the gift additional information custom data set fields, or you need the gift memo field, or you need to upload a file, then it's faster and easier to go to full add. You could quick add, but then you're still going to have to hit add more information to get there, so it's still 2 clicks versus just go full add and then it's a second click to add the payment. So if you need the stuff in full add, just go to full add. Just go to here and create an invoice, or go to if you're already in the gift index screen, then it may be faster to just add gift from there. Or if you're already in the contact record, if you need to go to the contact record and update their address, like they just mailed you a check and you look at the check and you go, hey, their address is different, I need to update the contact record. Then you may end up going to the contact record, updating their address, and since you're already there, you may click add gift from the contact record because you're already there. So it really is going to depend what you were doing just prior to entering this donation and what information you need, which screen is going to work best for you. So there is no best way. It will always sort of depend. And it may vary by donation. If person A sends you a regular donation that you can quick add, that's great. And then the second check you pick out of the pile is for a recurring donation. Then you have to go to full add because you can't set up a recurring donation from quick add. So it will depend. So now I'm going to go and I'm going to add another. I'm just going to create an invoice because now we're going to do a recurring donation. We'll do Michael again here because he's been such a good donor. You can change this date, by the way. Nobody ever asked me this, but just in case anyone's confused, you can backdate this, by the way. So I could be doing my data entry today for last week. Let's say I'm behind. So you can always backdate these invoices. So I'm going to pick my annual fund again. And we're going to do a recurring donation. So this one came in the mail. Let's say it's in person. This person called me up, or we had lunch, and I talked them into giving me a donation. So now I'm going to say they want to donate $25 a month. I'd like to make it on a recurring basis. So I've picked my amount, and then here's the frequency. So this is monthly, and then it's going to say for how many months. So maybe they've promised to do it for a year. So they're going to donate $25 a month for 12 months. That's going to equal $300 over the lifetime of this donation. And then it's going to bring up this little option here and say the only payment method you can use now is a credit card. If they're paying in some other way, cash or check, then you have to add it as a pledge. You cannot add it as a recurring donation. And then I'd fill out the rest of my fields, and then I would save. And then it's going to tell me to receive payment. And because I indicated this was a recurring donation, it's giving me another warning. It's like, no, really, seriously, you can only enter a credit card here. It's going to pre-fill that as credit card. If I try to change this, it's going to say, listen, you can't do it. You're not listening to me. Make sure you put credit card. You're going to enter the date of the payment, the amount, and then you're going to enter the credit card information. You have to make sure they have a billing address on file to charge the credit card. And then if you want to store this credit card so that it will automatically be charged every month without you doing anything, then you want to make sure you check this box, and that will save the card on the contact's record. Now, a note about that, we do get this question a lot. We do not save any credit card data inside Fundly CRM. Nobody can hack your CRM and steal credit card numbers. Can't be done. Your credit card numbers are saved in the Stripe account. What is saved in your Fundly CRM is what is called a token. It's a little fragment of information that is used to match the contact record in CRM to the contact record in your Stripe account, which has the credit cards. And sometimes some of you may get a weird error message that says like failed to tokenize card. That means it couldn't save the card in your CRM and it couldn't create that token, that little fragment of data to connect it to Stripe. So if you've ever seen that tokenized message and you wondered what on earth it was talking about, that's what it's talking about. Little fun fact for you. I'm so fun at parties, by the way. I have all these fun facts. Once you save that, you can then record the payment. Now I need to put in the credit card number. I don't have a credit card number here, so I'm actually just going to, I'm going to put in my fake credit card. Let's put in my fake credit card. Wait, let's see. 11111111. Might be a 16-digit card. Whoops, that was the card number. Get out of there. There we go. And this is Alexis Michael. And it's supposed to be that. And oh dear, I need a zip code. Oh, they're in India. Oh, that's weird. That's not supposed to pop up. Okay. Let's see if it takes that. I don't know if it'll take my fake card because I just made up a whole bunch of fake things there. Ta-da! Okay, actually it worked. Woo! All right, and now they are all set up. And in fact, if I go to my gifts index screen, we will now see that that is a recurring donation, and it will automatically charge at the same time every month. So we put that in for 10/4. On 11/4, it will now automatically charge that. There he is, and here's my new recurring donation that I had just set up. This will also show up on that recurring gifts index screen. Any questions about adding a recurring donation? Okay. All right, so let's talk about split gifts, that mysterious option that I skipped over. As I mentioned, split gifts is available from quick add and full add. And it's this little toggle button right here. What a split gift does is allows you to enter a transaction, a donation, one donation, across multiple funds or multiple programs or multiple campaigns or multiple events. So let's say that somebody sends you one check for $100, a $100 donation. And maybe they say to you, I want 50% of this to go to the youth art program and 50% to go to the adult art program. I could then, I could say that both of those are going to the same fund, but I could earmark it to two different programs. And then I'm going to click the plus to add another row here, and I can say that they're going to the same fund, but two different programs. This one's going to my youth program for $50. Hey, Darren. Sorry, what do you mean recurring gift for an appeal? What do you mean by appeal? Darren's asking if I can show recurring gift for an appeal. The DM module? What's the DM module? That may be the special Innovair. Are you talking about like the appeals module? Honestly, the appeals module, as far as I know, is for generating the letter. It's not for entering donations. You would still enter a donation the same way, as far as I know. So I don't, because I have appeals turned on in my demo system here, and I don't believe, there's no additional fields as far as I know to be able to link that to an appeal. I can check and double check that, but I think you would still set that up maybe as a campaign. That's a good question. I don't actually know, because Innovair, you guys are actually the only ones who use the appeals module, so we don't get a lot of questions about it. So I have to admit that I'm not exactly certain, but I will check on that and get back to you, that if there's anything different you would do when entering a donation. Because it does seem like you should be able to link the two, because that would make sense, so that you could track the appeal. But now I'm kind of like, I don't know how to link the two between the generating the letter, the ask, and then entering the donation. So I'll get back to you on that. It's a good question. For those of you who are wondering what we're talking about, so there is a paid add-on called the Appeals module, the Direct Mail module. It is a high-level add-on for generating direct mail appeals. So you can actually, this is for people who generate a lot of letters usually, and you can sort of segment your donor letters into different segments. You can do like A/B testing. You could do like two different letters and then sort of randomly assign your contacts or purposefully assign your contacts to get different letters. And you can kind of batch all that up and send it to a mail house that may be generating your letters for you. So you kind of generate the list of people that's going to, and you give them the letter, and it kind of goes together as what's called a package. And then they can just sort of spit that out. And it'll even like sort of barcode the letters that go out, so that when they come back, they can be scanned by a mail house if you have a processing center that's accepting your donations. So they can be scanned in to know like the particular letter they got with what wording, in case you're doing sort of that testing where you're using different types of wording to see which people respond to more. So that is an option. You'll find that in the your account setting add-ons, and you can purchase that as a paid add-on. So split gifts. So back to split gifts. So in this case, and I could add multiple rows here. I don't know that there's a limit on how many rows. So I could split this donation across multiple things. And I don't have to put them to the same fund. I could have said maybe this one I'm going to put to my 2018 annual fund, and maybe not earmark it to a program. So this is one way that you can use split gifts, is to earmark donations, one donation that came in. Instead of entering two separate donations, you can split that donation across multiple funds, across multiple programs, across multiple campaigns, across multiple events. And one of the most frequent uses for this is if you want to track credit card processing fees as a separate line item. So you know that, a $50 donation comes in and they paid by credit card, that the Stripe is going to take 2.2 or 2.9%, whatever your interest rate is with Stripe, your fee rate with Stripe is. So a lot of times people will create a separate fund, and I keep meaning to do one in my demo system, and I never do, so I call it project management fees, but pretend this is credit card fees. We'll just all pretend credit card fees. So I could then put, this is going to be like $48 approximately, and this is going to be like $2. Wait, Terry can't do math in her head. Wait, what is 02? I should be able to do that. It was $1. Okay, that was close enough. There we go. All right, so there we go. So this is my credit card fees, and I could say, $1 went to credit card fees, and the other 49 went into my fund, my unrestricted fund or my annual fund. So that's one way that you can track credit card fees or processing fees. This is also really great for if you're using PayPal or Network for Good and want to track that fee amount separately to do sort of more in-depth reporting, to make it easier to match up and reconcile between your QuickBooks and your CRM, or between your CFO, your accounting software, and for your accountant to be able to match up to your CRM, or if you just want to be able to run those sort of fiscal reports directly from your CRM and say, okay, of the $10,000 in donations we got, this much actually went to fees though and was taken out. We only actually got this amount. So that's one option for split gifts. Any questions about split gifts, what they are, why you'd use them? Okay, so let's now spend a couple minutes talking about those really awesome donations that you get that are super complicated. So I was the director of fundraising for a nonprofit for 7.5 years. And we got a lot of those donations. And we had grant funding and we had donations that would come in that were awful. So you get things that, donor advised funds. You might get donations from philanthropic managers. So, a couple of examples of that kind of thing is I was in Massachusetts, working in Massachusetts, and we had the Essex County Community Foundation. And the Essex County Community Foundation managed a whole bunch of family foundation trusts. So those trusts would actually make donations. They weren't grants, they were donations. They were kind of like donor advised funds, but they were like a family trust. And ECCF managed it. And there were several different models under this ECCF. Not everything that came from ECCF had the same model. It was terribly confusing. So for instance, we had the Webster Family Foundation. And the Websters would write us a check every year, send us a couple $100 for our, for whatever, just to support us. So the donor was the Webster family. And in fact, the letter would come from ECCF, from the foundation, and it would say, the Webster Family Trust has decided to donate, X number of dollars to you. And here's the check. The thank you letter should go to, Mr. and Mrs. Webster, and here's their address. So in that case, we're kind of like, well, who's the donor, right? Like, who do I put as the donor name here? Is it ECCF? Because they sent me the letter, and I had a program officer that if I had questions, I needed to contact her. But the thank you letter goes to the family, the actual donor. So it's kind of like, what do I do? How do I record that? We also would get a check from ECCF every year for the Andover Group, which was a donor advised fund, which is a bunch of individual donors get together and sort of pool their money. And then as a group, they get to decide how to spend that money. ECCF was the administrative arm for them. But the Andover Group was anonymous. We would get a check from ECCF and a letter from our program officer who would say, the Andover Group has decided to give you $500. Thank you letter should come to, Jane at ECCF. So we didn't know who the Andover Group people were, and we didn't know how to contact them, and we were not allowed to contact them We were not given their contact information other than the name of the donor advised fund, but we never know who the trustees were. We didn't know who was on this Andover group, and they didn't want to be thanked. They didn't want to have any contact with us whatsoever. Another example I would get from the Boston Foundation, which was a foundation in its own right that would administer grants and donations, and they would make their own donations to us, but they were also the administrative entity for a group called the Beaupost Group, who would send us a $10,000 anonymous donation. However, the Beaupost Group did want a thank you letter, but they wanted to be anonymous otherwise. So when we publicized that receipt, that donation, we had to say that it was from anonymous. So we thanked the Boston Foundation because they were the administrative arm and they were involved. And we also thanked the Beaupost Group. But when we put on our website our list of donors or our annual report, we had to list it as anonymous. It wasn't listed as the Boston Foundation because it wasn't their donation. They were just sending us the check and administering it, but they also wanted to be thanked. And it was never quite clear to me, but I think they had a hand in helping Beaupost decide. They were part of sort of the advisory group that helped the trustees of Beaupost decide who to give money to. So they weren't completely hands-off like ECCF and Webster Family, but they weren't completely hands-on like in administration the way they were with the Andover group. So you get lots of these sorts of weird intermediaries, right? Like United Way is a big one. They do giving campaigns at companies, and they will send you one check that has a whole bunch of donations from a whole bunch of different people. Sometimes United Way will send you a list of all those individual donors and the amounts. And you can contact those donors and you can add those donors to your database and say, oh, next year I'm just going to appeal to them directly because now I have their info. And sometimes United Way just says, here's $536.29. That came from, because they do a percentage. They'd get a pool of money that comes in, like people who don't designate to a particular charity, it all goes to United Way, and then United Way to all their affiliates, they just take, 10%, 20%, 29.6%. I don't know, because I always got weird checks with weird amounts. I couldn't figure out what their math was, but they just are cutting it as a percentage, and then they just send you a check, and they're like, this is contributions from like our annual giving campaign from multiple organizations, but they don't give you any information, and you're kind of like, well, it's not United Way's money, but I don't know whose money it is. How do I record that? So you have a lot of these weird options, right? Where you're kind of like, I don't really know what I'm doing with this donation. And what Terry always says, as with the dates, pick a method and be consistent. It's then up to you to come up with a scheme that makes sense for your organization. My organization, what we ended up doing was we said, well, who does the thank you letter go to? The person that the thank you letter is going to is the decision maker, and therefore the donor. So for Webster Family Trust, it was pretty clear. Webster Family Trust was the donor, and that would go in the donor name. ECCF was just the administrative branch. I'd put that down here in the gift additional information or in the memo field. This check came from ECCF and they're administering this, but all contact should be directly with Webster. For the Andover group, the donor was the Andover group, but the thank you went to ECCF. In that case, I would call ECCF the soft credit donor because they were a co-donor. They were getting a thank you letter. So Andover was the decision maker, but ECCF was getting the thank you letter. I would call those the soft credit donor because they weren't just an administrative arm. Same for Beaupost and Boston Foundation. Beaupost was the donor, but Boston Foundation got soft credit because they got the thank you letter. So that's kind of how my organization decided to do it. I can't tell you what's best for your organization, but keep in mind, the only people that the system is going to generate a thank you letter for is the donor or soft credit donor. So that helps guide you a bit. And the other question you kind of want to ask yourself, is who made the decision? Who do I need to communicate with going forward? Who's the contact? And is this entity just a check writer? Like, are they just like basically like a contractual fiscal agent where they're just writing checks and I have no reason to communicate with them and don't need to, like Network for Good? They're just passing the money through. They're not making decisions. They don't get a thank you. They're just an administrative arm. And so once you kind of ask yourself those questions, and when you have one of these kind of messy ones, and you start defining each entity's role, it makes it easier to figure out where you should put each entity when recording. Now, some people put all of, like even the administrative entity in the soft credit field, and that's okay. That is a-okay. You can do it that way. Just, again, be consistent. Because if you're inconsistent, and sometimes the fiscal agent is the donor, and sometimes the fiscal agent's the soft credit donor, and sometimes they're down here in the gift additional info field or in the memo field, when you go to write a report, your report is going to be a nightmare. And if you're trying to write a report and say, who are our donors, and you've mixed fiscal agents into your donor list, and then you're trying to like go through a list of like 200 donors for the last year, and you're like, well, they're not really a donor, they just wrote checks. Like, and you're trying to manually manipulate, like going to Excel and deleting rows because you've got data that is not really, because it wasn't in the right field, which makes it impossible to pull the report, you're going to pull your hair out. So it's best upfront, decide, what those players are and how you define those players, and then be consistent. Any questions about that? I will tell you also, one thing we did, we never got any tribute gifts at my organization. That was not something that we really did. So I actually would use the on behalf of quite frequently, like Boston Foundation. I might put Boston Foundation as the donor and say on behalf of the BOPOST group. That is also one way you can do it. If you don't have tribute gifts, then you could use the on behalf of, and that also is one way that you can record those. Now, if you do have tribute gifts, obviously that doesn't work. You want to keep this clean and keep this just for tribute gifts. All right, so the last thing we need to talk about is in-kind donations. And this is actually pretty straightforward and pretty easy. Same thing, full ad and quick ad for in-kind gifts. In-kinds is anything that's not money. So in-kind are goods and services. This includes gift cards, and then it could be services like auction items, if somebody's donating auction items to you, or things you're going to raffle off. So, it could be like a free massage or a spa day or a vacation package, or it can also be things that people are donating in support of an event. So if you get the table decorations and table rental and space and balloons and the food and things like that donated, that would be in kind. If people are donating food to your board meeting, or office supplies, things like that. All of that is called in kind. And it's pretty straightforward. You're just going to put in your name. Most likely this will be an organization, but it could be an individual. Again, you can create a contact on the fly from here. They don't already have to be in your system. You're going to link that to a fund. You can put the source, so how did this get to you? Gift date. And then these are required fields. The fair market value, so how much is this worth? If it's a gift card, that's pretty straightforward, right? $25 gift card is worth $25. If it's a good or service, then you may have to estimate. Often, what my organization did was we had a form that in-kind donors had to fill out, and they would tell us the worth. And we just took their word for it. If they said it was worth $5,000, we said, okay, it's $5,000, whatever. They gave me a diamond necklace, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure those are paste. That's not real, but they're telling me it's $5,000. Okay, $5,000. It's not for me to judge. And that was our rule, was we just took with the donor's word. You may have other rules, other accounting rules for how you verify that amount or determine that amount. So, again, be consistent, decide what that is. And then here you're going to put a little description of what it is. So this might be a gift certificate for 1 hour massage at Dairy Spa Palace. Then, do you want to send the donation acknowledgement letter, now, later, or never? Who asked for the donation? And then you can also assign a soft credit donation. As with cash donations, you can add more information to get full ad in kind. You can do full ad in kind from the contact record and from the gifts index screen. And same options here. Additional fields, gift memo. If it's a tribute, You can link it to a program, campaign, event, solicited by, upload a file, and the gift additional information fields. So those are all additional ones that are available to you when you full add versus quick add. You cannot do split gifts for in-kind. Split gift is only for cash. Any questions about in-kind donations? Yeah, so Sophia asked, yes, for in-kind donations, you're not required to add the donation value. Yes, I know it's not highlighted here, but it is a required screen. So as you can see, I took it out. It's telling me it's required. So it doesn't have the yellow shading, but it is required. Description and value is required. Fund, source, and gift date, these are all required, as well as donor name, whether you're quick adding or full adding. It's a good question. All the other fields are optional. Any other questions about donations? That is donations in a nutshell. All right, well, if there's no other questions, I will release you all back into the wild. If you do think of any additional questions, as always, you can send us an email at support@fundly.com. And don't forget, tomorrow is Thursday. We have our drop-in help sessions from 11 a.m. Pacific to noon Pacific. That is 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm there for the entire hour, whether anybody comes or not. So those who show up usually get a free hour of training. So you can ask questions about donations or anything else. Until next time, everyone, have a good rest of your day.